Welcome to Voices of LTCI. Join us as we explore the evolving landscape of long-term care insurance with industry leaders and your host, Dr. Shar Hugh.
Today we have Doug Reilly. He is co-lead of CNA's long-term care division. He is here in Austin, and we're really excited to have him because he's got a unique perspective on the industry I can't wait to dive into. So Doug, thanks for being here. As I just alluded to, you have a unique perspective. Can you tell us how you got your start in long-term care insurance?
So like most in the industry, I kind of stumbled into it. But for me, my journey really started out of school. I stumbled into insurance, but I spent the start of my career in not long-term care, in PNC lines, finance, accounting background. 5.5 years ago, an opportunity popped up at CNA to join the LTC division. And again, I kind of stumbled into it. It turned out to be a good opportunity. I joined the team, but I was never seeking it out. And I found myself now in a unique position because relative to most of my peers, most of your guests, I have far less experience, 5.5 years experience, but also my background's finance and accounting. I only moved into claims and operations wellness 18 months ago. And so it really positioned me to kind of be this outsider. But I found it's just an extremely rewarding place to be. It's one of those industries where it's a noble profession, our CEO likes to say, but I know we're making a difference, and it's small enough, but also impactful enough where you can make a difference on the outcome of the industry and people's lives.
That's interesting. So recent to our industry, came from PNC. What are the major differences that you see in PNC or your work really specifically? You can speak to your work or the industry as a whole versus what you're now learning here in long-term care insurance.
It's totally different. The main thing though is your customer. Like on the PNC side, your customer is really like a business. It's the helper bees. Here, our customer is like a person. It's my grandma. It's my parents. You can see yourself much more closely, and you know that impact on what you're doing matters so much more. So that's just a huge difference. And then I think, on the nerdy side of me, the math number side, I think this is the most complicated line of insurance I've ever encountered. And the fact of the matter is you wrote business 30 years ago, and it's going to persist for a long period of time. And so it's just a really interesting dynamic.
I'm going to jump ahead to a question. You just opened up something that's really interesting. You said it's really complicated because sort of the timescales that are involved and sort of the history of the product. How are you addressing that complexity internally? How do you think that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in that complexity, or do you think the complexity might kill off opportunity?
That's certainly a risk of killing it off. And I think it all starts with talent. You have to make sure you're hiring the best talent and the right talent that views that as like a great opportunity versus being scared and shut down by it. And so, again, this is something where you can make your career in this and you can make a difference. And you have time in a lot of ways to make a difference. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's so fun is the complexity creates opportunity for the right people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You mentioned two areas in sort of your description of now what you lead. You mentioned claims ops and wellness. I know wellness is really a hot topic here in long-term care insurance across the industry. And it happened, you're coming in, even though you've only been at it 5.5 years, you might think the whole half of your LTCI career has been focused on wellness, but really it's been a short sliver of time. Can you speak to the claims ops side of things? Are there any particular initiatives that you think are going to change the way either CNA does business with their policyholders, how they engage with their policyholders, or more broadly the industry engages?
I think it's one of those things. There's no silver bullet here in my mind, but it's the collection of everyone, whether it's internally at your company, with regulators or peer companies or vendors like yourself working together to solve this. And for me, my perspective, and it's always tough for me to have these conversations because what's my perspective? It's 5.5 years. So many other people have decades in this. But what I've seen in the industry is there's a new product meeting a really important need 30 years ago. And there's a lot of success, a lot of excitement, momentum build, a lot of sales. Over time, the industry started to realize they had a problem. And a lot of these were put in runoff. They weren't actively managed. Over the past decade, companies have been more proactively managing this business, which is a good thing. But really the focus of the attention, I think, largely has been on rate increases to make sure we remain solvent to meet those promises we made. And again, that was important. As hard as it was, it's something that had to be done. But what excites me is the tide seems to be shifting, is the focus is now on wellness, claim outcomes, improving the outcomes for our insureds, which is really just a win for everyone. And so for me, that's where I'm so excited about where the industry's headed. And that's really all claims and operations investments.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about, just even in one-on-one conversations, you and I've had a lot of dialogue around learning about policyholder behaviors and their needs and understanding. You mentioned this, what's so different from PNC is you're talking about individual. And I think you've been really good at saying we've got to learn about that individual. And then now with your finance and accounting background, how do we expand that to a macroscopic view? Can you explain a little bit more when you say you want to learn about your policyholders, not only their behaviors, but I'm filling in the gaps now, but potentially like their needs? What does that really mean to you, either from a claims operational perspective and how do they interact with you as a carrier, but also potentially from a wellness program?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you take a step back, like we're a relationship business. We're there to like support people in their time of most need. And the way we've historically done that is we said, hey, if you need our help, we'll kind of send you a check. And we're saying, hey, we can offer so much more now. We believe, and we've seen this done elsewhere, in the PNC business, I think about it as risk control. In healthcare, it's wellness plans and motivating employees to like take active steps in their health or get rewards. And we believe that we can make that difference here with our policyholders and it can really benefit them. But if you take a step back, our relationship, and I think most in the industry with policyholders has not been like, we haven't invested in it. Just like a relationship with your spouse, you have to invest in it. You can't just say, hey, I need something from you. And so there's this opportunity of, we know there's opportunities to help our insureds, but they have to be ready to listen. And have we really cultivated that environment for them to listen? And so again, I think it's a little naive of me to think that I know at all what our policyholders need. Like everyone's different. Imagine if I said, hey, Chara, this is what you need to do to raise better children. You're going to laugh in my face and you're never going to listen to me. And so for me, getting our policyholders, policyholder predictive modeling type things, that's really about better getting to know and form that relationship. And it's not just like AI behind the scenes, like secretly doing it. It's really forming a relationship, getting to know them so that they trust us and we've earned that trust and we can help guide them and help them be aware of things that might help them.
Yeah. We're going to touch on some of the concepts you just mentioned around innovation and change, but you just said, 5.5 years in long-term care insurance. Is there anything in particular within that experience in LTCI that stands out as like a milestone or something that changed your thought process within the industry and framed out what you were just talking about, which is, our ability to enhance and change behavior, learn more, as well as sort of engage with policyholders from a claims perspective? Any big milestone that stands out to you?
This is another one of those things where I kind of laugh, like big milestone, 5.5 years. It's kind of like, it's how like, so I'm sure I'll laugh at my responses, 10 years down the road. But for me, big things in the past 5 years that definitely have shaped me and the industry. I think one is COVID. And the second one is cloud computing. I think we all know COVID had a profound impact on our insureds, our policyholders, our customers in an adverse way. But it also really opened up everyone's eyes to the importance of the product we're providing, the importance of having those conversations, the availability to meet policyholder needs in ways you never thought. You can do things remotely, virtually. Actually, our policyholders and even at older ages, they want to engage with us. They're open to digital forms. And so fundamentally, COVID shaped everything. I think it's a once in a generation, a lifetime thing. I hope less frequently. But the other thing is cloud computing. And, I'm starting to realize like I grew up kind of on computers, but like this next generation, like that's all they've known. And the power of the cloud, whether it's generative AI, machine learning, using data to make better processes. When I look at that and I think about every interaction you have in your life and how automated it is, it's really powered, I think, by the cloud and data. And you compare that to most of the interactions and processes within long-term care, and we're behind. And so for me, it's demonstrating like there's so much possibility out there through cloud, and we haven't figured out how to capitalize on and use it to better everyone, but I know it's out there. And so when I take a step back and think, those are two things that are profoundly shaping the way I think about the world as we move forward.
Yeah. Those are great. We haven't had cloud computing. That one threw me for a loop. That's great. I mean, I want to dive into that because you mentioned that there's challenges. We're behind on long-term care insurance just because of the way that the data is housed and data is stored. We can't even think about generative AI, right? We can't even think about custom workflows right now. Do you think that there is momentum to change that? And maybe you have that outsider's perspective that you had mentioned. You see how, I don't know PNC at all, but presumably there was a world where it wasn't as digital and it was probably painful as it started to evolve. Do you think we can build up that goodwill and impetus to change, or do you think that it's going to take a really long time before we are able to accomplish that?
I'm an optimist, so like it's gonna happen. I think it's gonna happen faster than even I think, and most people think. I'm starting to realize like there's so much I don't even understand, and like when you talk to the experts in this field and you just like chat GPT, like where did that come from? And like the art of the possible is just so tremendous here. So like I know it's gonna happen, but it kind of leads into another thing of like one of the things I constantly talk to people in the industry or when we're hiring people, and I always say change never happens as fast as you want, especially when you work at a big corporation impacting hundreds of thousands of lives. But just because it takes longer than you want doesn't mean when you look back in the rearview mirror that you don't go, wow, how far we've come. Yeah. And I can even say that in my long tenure of 5.5 years. How much has changed and improved in the past 5.5 years? Like, I think if you would ask most people 2.5 years ago, would we be having these types of conversations we're having on wellness today? They'd be like, no, this is taking forever. No one's buying it. No one gets it. And look at how far we've come. So I'm extremely optimistic.
I think it's really, really good perspective that we don't hit on enough, either in the industry and industry conversations, but also on this podcast, which is we always talk a lot about when it comes to digital or even wellness programs or how we don't know anything about our policyholders. It's usually with a slightly negative view, and we talk about the deficits, but I think it's a really good idea. We should look back, even the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've come a long way to even having those conversations, and they're hard, they're challenging, because each individual carrier has to have it on an executive level, and it has to trickle down, and then we as a whole have to move forward. So I think we should pat ourselves on the back. We're doing a really great job. We could move faster, like you said. You always want to move quicker, but we should at least acknowledge and take pride in how far we've come in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, and since joining claims operations wellness the past 18 months, I think about like the pilot CNAs completed and then all the ones in progress and other carriers are doing, the number of lives touched. And what I always tell people is I know these things make a favorable impact on our policyholders, and we're having a real impact on them. The question is just about like, is it optimized? Are we targeting it the right way or giving people the right solution? But we're making a favorable impact. And I think it's all about we know we can do better, we want to do better, and so how fast can we move?
Yeah. Well, the second thing you mentioned, when it was the first, was COVID, and we know that's a massive generational issue. But we as humans have poor short-term memory. Sometimes I was actually trying to think about what did I do during the shutdown. I couldn't even remember. It feels like a complete fantasy world. But you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, how there's a lasting effect on population that we serve and what COVID did, which it accelerated adoption rates of digital technologies. Mm-hmm. Do you still see that in your world in CNA as you're interacting with policyholders? Was that a small blip and in our short-term memory, is this gone, we want to go back? Or do you think that cat's out of the bag and now everybody wants an increasingly more digital experience, or however you mentioned COVID's effect?
I mean, I'd say in a lot of ways I'm too far removed to like have a perfect pulse on that, but I think the cat is out of the bag. I think there's this myth that, people wouldn't engage. The only way to engage was mail. And we proved that's wrong. And if you just take a look at how many people you know over the age of 60 that have an iWatch or an Apple Watch or digital technology, iPhone, like how much that's accelerated too. You look back 5 years ago, I don't think many people would have been like, this percentage of the population over age 60, 70 is using these types of technology, and here we are. So again, I don't have like a strong pulse on that, but I do think we've come a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I use the example oftentimes of at the start of the pandemic, we launched virtual nursing assessments, which there's no way the industry would have used that at all. And now for many carriers, it's the default standard in a very short amount of time. It took something so catastrophic to cause that shift. But for a lot of carriers, it's here because individuals are more prone to interact with it. You see really high quality data capture and then the ease. Now your policyholders really prefer this in a way that they just was foreign and alien to them historically.
Yeah, it helps us get care in place faster, approve claims faster. We're not as bottlenecked on resources because we can resource from all over the country in a lot of cases. Yeah.
All right, so 5.5 years in long-term care insurance. We keep going back to that. I mean, you've had a really quick rise in your career. I mean, to senior leadership. I mean, you're leading a very important organization in long-term care insurance. You've got a good team. What stories, what anecdotes, what advice can you pass on to other individuals, wherever they are in their career, that have been impactful to you as you've had this fairly meteoric rise within CNA? My words, not yours.
Yeah, his words, yeah.
Yeah.
I always struggle with that, right? I don't have a lot of years of experience, and so many other people have a lot more experience, and I think that's one of the things I'm getting more comfortable with. But, some of the things and lessons and stories I tell people often is early on in my career, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of positions in finance where I was supporting decision makers. And as I kind of grew through the ranks, I kept reminding people, like, oftentimes you have a seat at the table. And I think a lot of times reminding people you have a seat at the table for a reason. Use that voice. No question is too dumb. No comment. If you have a question or a comment, you should make it. They want you at the table and you're there for a reason. Don't be afraid to use that. And so for me, I think that's proven really valuable, of like willing to ask the tough questions, obviously politely in the right way, but just speaking up, I think, is extremely important. And I think the other thing that I've kind of learned over time is the challenges are a challenge for a reason. There's no easy answers often. And it can be overwhelming of how to start, or you can be waiting for someone to tell you what to do. But what I've learned is more often than not, even if you're the most junior one in the room, everyone struggles with that. When you're dealing with something complex or a problem or an issue, there's no clear answers, and they want people to speak up, and there's a void. And so don't be afraid to start. Don't be afraid to throw out the first idea. Don't be afraid to do something and know you might fail, but the hardest thing is often starting. And so what I always tell people is don't be afraid to start and fail. It's a lot better to start and fail than to not start at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's good advice. I've never had what I'll call a real job in a big company. So it's good to hear that in a large company that deals in a fairly, you assess risk, and it's okay as a whatever level within your career to go and throw that risky idea out there, because like you said, it's a hard problem for a reason, and it might oftentimes take some outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
So given that you are an outsider, in your words, coming into long-term care insurance, and you've hit on how attractive it is from an individualistic impact perspective, what have you been able to, do you see that we should learn from other industries, that we as an industry, as long-term care insurance? Is there anything that you think we ought to be adopting in a way that either you see us not doing or are taking that initial first step? I know you've hit on cloud-based computing. That's a big one. Even just migrating off on-prem data storage just took a long time to happen. But do you see any other lessons out there that we can take from either PNC or any other insurance line?
I don't have a lot of strong opinions in this, but again, I think one of the things I've noticed is this is just like any other business, any other complex product. And a lot of these lines are in runoff, but that doesn't mean that the way you should tackle it should be substantially different. You need to invest, you need to actively manage it, and you need to be strategic. And I think because it's small and because it has been in runoff, we need to be a little bit more proactive in bringing in fresh ideas.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason we have challenges, and we need to infuse those fresh ideas, those fresh things happening. And when you have a lot of industry experience, you sometimes have those blind spots. And I see that now with 5.5 years of experience, like what blind spots do I have? And that's why I love coming to some of these things where we get to meet with a lot of peers and vendors. It's like, oh, I didn't thought about that. Yeah. Like, I'm not exactly sure what to do with that, but I should be thinking about it.
That's a good point. You're here in Austin. We've got 5-6 senior leaders from all the different carriers in town, just talking and having just the open dialogue. Do you find that to be rare in sort of in your professional career, that ability to share because we're not competitive? Do you find that to be an asset, or is it just totally weird to navigate?
It has been very weird to navigate to start with. It was foreign to me. My background is finance, accounting, some actuarial stuff, supporting those teams, and that's just a very different. The culture and also just the ability to collaborate, it's just different. And so it's been a little bit difficult to navigate. It's just so new to me. But I found it extremely valuable, and so much so that I've really been pushing to try to drive other ideas. People on my team, hey, have you proactively reached out to your peers at these other companies? I'm happy to set up the connections because of how much value I found out of that. Just having that, I can pick up the phone and call 6 to 10 different carriers, my peers, and say, I want to bounce something off of you. And I found it extremely valuable. And I think that applies whether in an active business where it's more competitive or it's something in runoff like LTC.
Yeah. And that was the genesis of the podcast. I'm curious how you got up to speed in long-term care insurance, because I came from a service provider, so I was an outsider, but mostly from the service and on the insurance side. You knew insurance, but didn't necessarily understand long-term care in specific. And I had to get up to speed, and I was just blown away with how open individuals are to teaching and sharing. I just don't think there's any way I could have gotten up to speed in the intricacies, because like you mentioned, there's a lot of complexity, but even those intricacies and nuances, and then to innovate as quickly without this open environment of many of the leaders out there who are willing to go and chat and share and try to increase the knowledge base of the entire community.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. What I tell a lot of people is like ask questions. I learned through asking questions. My new team, at times I know I frustrate them. Like I ask so many questions, and they're so basic. And some things that they don't. Sometimes it doesn't stick. I ask it again. But I think it's so important to like develop that skill of being comfortable just asking a lot of questions, forming a hypothesis, asking questions to test it, and kind of recycling.
Yeah. All right, well, let's close with areas of innovation and change. You've hit on a few, I think, really important ones like cloud-based computing. Are there other areas of innovation, either from a wellness perspective, claims operations, or something out of left field that you're particularly excited about, or that you'd want to see us devote more effort and more attention to as an industry?
I'm honestly excited about everything. At this point in my career, I see everything that goes on in our division and all the opportunities to innovate, and I see how people care. Like everyone you run into in this space, they genuinely care. Like it's the exception you find this person that's just in it for the paycheck. And so I'm really excited about the innovation that can happen in all spectrums. When I think about like the customer experience of having a claim approved and what that looks like today versus what it could look like in the future, like I'm extremely optimistic. And I think it's just going to make such a better experience for our customers. And when it comes to wellness, I'm excited because of the momentum that's building. And it's hard to articulate, but I think wellness is so much more than just like helping someone age in home. It's this holistic experience of how do we really incorporate this whole new capability into everything we do in this industry. And so I know when we look back 5-10 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, oh, wow, we didn't quite know how this was going to shake out, but the industry is fundamentally different in a good way.
Yeah. You made a comment outside just before we were recording with a group that I think was really important. I haven't yet heard anybody say, but I'll predict that you'll start to hear it increasingly more, which is, I'm paraphrasing your comments, but we treat wellness as a separate entity, but wellness should be integrated in everything that we do, from your eligibility for your pre-claims initiatives. But right now, they tend to be separate from your claims modernization or your claims acts. But you made the statement that it should be completely integrated into sort of one seamless customer experience. I'm putting words in your mouth, but do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, that's something we're kind of like figuring out how to put into words, put into a strategy at CNA right now. But like when I think about it, I think most companies, they have a contact center or call center. They have a team that makes claim approval or decisions. They have a team that recertifies claims. They have a team that approves claim payments. And they're kind of like set up to achieve that function. In my mind, all of those functions should also be serving the needs of wellness for our policyholders. So the contact center, asking open-ended questions to our insureds to maybe identify key risk factors and help identify, hey, you might be at more need than you think, and then we can feedback loop and help you in a way. Is it making claim decisions so that when you're on claim, really proactively asking questions? That's going to help us proactively manage the claim. Is it using claim payment approvals to really, what are we learning about the types of services they're getting that better influence how we should help them manage care in the future? And so I think the opportunities are endless. But again, that's not like wellness of I'm going to partner with a vendor to do fall prevention. That's a holistic description or way of thinking about wellness.
I think that's a perfect way to encapsulate through your perspective, and also what we were saying earlier with how far we've come. Just hearing now that there is a possibility, a world in the near-term future where wellness is not this thing, again, off to the side of fall prevention program. It just becomes like we talk about claims and we understand what that means, and not having those separate. I mean, I think the fact that that is on the horizon from large carriers like CNA is heartening. We should take heart in that as an industry as a whole, but maybe it takes an outsider's perspective to come in and say, here's the art of possible. We can do this. Yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's complicated, but we almost can't not do it in that double negative. We have to go ahead and proceed with it.
Yeah, I often talk to people about when, as an insurance carrier, we know with certainty, like the amount of claim payments we're going to pay in the future. Not with certainty, but we have a high level of certainty of like, that's a big number. And when I talk to people, I say, we can't afford not to try.
Yeah.
We might try and fail, and then finally get it, but we can't afford not to try. And so I'm really excited about where we're headed. And, you know, in some ways I may be an outsider, but I think it's important to like say, none of this is possible without the active engagement of everyone.
Yeah.
Insiders, outsiders, vendors, regulators, carriers, the insured. And it's like that collaboration that's going to get us there.
Yeah. So you mentioned that on how much opportunity that there is. How do you manage that from a perspective of, and this is a broad generalization, but do you run at everything all at once and just that's what's going to take to make a massive cultural shift? Or how do you make the decision broadly? Do you run them in parallel or do you run them in serial? Do you wait and then understand what's happening? Or do you say, hey, this is well-honed principles and other lines. We're just going to do it. We're going to have blind faith and go at it. I know blind faith is a tough word in the corporate environment, so I'm using it intentionally here.
That's a tough one. I mean, if I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you. I might be retired out of, you know, I think it differs. It's every culture is different in every company. Every person's different. You know, how I think about it is I want to make sure we're putting down a robust foundation or framework or strategy, but then we just got to start. And starting is different for every company. Starting for one company may be going all in one type of solution. Starting for another carrier might be a pilot. Starting for another carrier might be just investing in data analytics in the cloud to get to know their customers. Another company, it might be investing in how we communicate and engage with our insureds. So for me, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but it's starting. And also, no one company can do this alone. So it has to be starting and bringing others along for the journey.
Yeah. Well, Doug, thank you. I mean, thanks for being here. I know we started with that you're an outsider in the industry. You're decidedly an insider now. I mean, I can hear your name in a lot of industry discussions. I hear CNA sort of on the forefront of that. So thank you for being on the podcast, but more importantly, thank you for what you do for the industry and all the lives that you serve.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you.